listening to Clear the Mechanism.
The Robby Rose Show.
The Robby Rose Show.
Yeah, guys, what's going on? Hey, it's your host, Robby Rowland, here on another Q&A pod. If you guys notice, I have new background music, so shocking the system. All right, so Q&A podcast. I really like doing these, actually. I get a lot of good questions that, spark really good conversation. So, as always, anyone that emails me, I will record audio and send that back. So if you're an individual that has a question, shoot me an email, contact robbyrow@gmail.com, and more than likely you'll get an audio message back and maybe be featured on the next Q&A podcast. I actually have I think 2 more, including this one, full of questions. So I'm saving them. Anyway, so what we're going to be talking about today is mobility affecting velocity, Indy ball leagues, fastball spin, 0-2 counts, off-season throwing, what side of the rubber you should pitch on. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good information. I want to take this time now and talk about some really good content that I just produced. First and foremost, weighted balls. The article that I wrote on it is not to say, hey, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. It's literally giving you guys all of the information that I have on weighted balls and then taking just a ton of different articles and including that. So what I'm going to do is I will link everything in the show notes of this episode. The show notes can be found therobbyrowshow.com/QA-pod5. I think what you can do is you go to the podcast app that you're listening to this on, and then that should have in the description of that episode, you'll see a link to the show notes at the very top. If you want to just click that button, you'll get redirected right to that page. And then the next blog that I produced this past week was my personal journey from throwing 85 miles an hour and getting released to throwing 95 plus, and advancing multiple levels and, all that stuff. I've talked about it a lot, but in this particular blog, I talk about my arm path makeover, which obviously wasn't the only thing that I changed. There was a ton of drastic changes that went into my entire, rediscovery, if you will. But in this blog, I talk about my arm path and how I kind of went about identifying, what my natural arm path was and so on and so forth. But again, I'll link that in the show notes of this episode for you guys to check out. And then the last one I just did, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, was on back leg mechanics. I think, you look at any really hard thrower and they move extremely efficient and their back leg moves extremely efficient, man. And when we talk about what the goal of the pitching delivery is in the sense of optimizing energy, moving through time and space, extremely efficient, making sure that we're on time, applying force, transferring, all of that stuff. I talk about it in that blog on back leg mechanics. But again, links to all 3 of those blogs in the show notes of this episode. therobbyrowshow.com/QA-pod5. QAPOD5. All right, let's get to the questions. I got 6 of them today, so let's do it. All right, guys. First question I got was, hey, I tend to see your posts a lot and see how often you talk about mobility. How much does mobility really affect your velocity, and how does it affect your velocity? Hey, what's going on, man? So yeah, when it comes to mobility, obviously I'm really passionate about it. It's kind of like an addiction at this point. But the correlation for me personally, and I'm not going to back this up with any freaking scientific studies or whatever, but coming from the personal experience, it's night and day the difference in my ability to throw at high power output, having the movement capacity. So the way I look at it, I think from an instructional side, so this is even when I do like my analysis stuff, is I tend to look at it in the scope of it being a movement capacity issue, which limits the athlete from getting into certain, positions during the delivery, or is it a strength capacity issue, which, the athlete doesn't have the ability to, handle the specific load that needs to be handled during the delivery. Now, obviously, through those two components, mobility is super important, right? I think the disconnect a lot of the times is like people will come up and ask me, I need to do, or how do I need to throw harder, and is mobility directly linked to velocity? And if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that anytime I talk about velocity, dude, it's never just one thing. It's never just two things. Like, it is so much goes into the ability to throw the baseball hard. And, I think it's about putting yourself in the best possible situation for you to accomplish that. So, if you're someone that needs, guidance on a specific routine with mobility, I will include my mobility ebook link in this email, and I'll also shoot you a discount too if you want to check that out. If not, no worries, man. All right, much love. God bless, and good luck with everything, man. Just to piggyback off that, it's funny. This podcast might be a little rough because I've realized that I answered like all of these questions early morning, and that's maybe why you hear me sound like I just got out of bed. Anyways, to piggyback off that response, the only thing that I can essentially do in my position is talk about personal experience. And when it comes to mobility, all I can really say is, holy smokes, man. Ever since I started taking my mobility stuff really seriously, not only have I seen, a ton of like mobility gains and overall just health gains, but dude, I recover so much better than I used to, man. I remember like, going through really strenuous lifts in the off season, in the past, dude. And man, I'd be like sore. And now it's like, now that I've taken my mobility, having like certain protocols set in place for the whole entire, day, that's like the biggest thing for me that stuck out, dude, is, my ability to recover and just feel really, really good each and every day. So that's what I wanted to piggyback off of on the mobility question. And as far as it being linked to velocity, I think we can look at that. And I think the only way that we could really dive into it, dude, is like talk to people, athletes that are throwing really, really hard and see where they're at mobility wise. I know the individuals that I've played with throughout my career that throw really hard move really, really well. And in order to move really, really well, I think you have to have that movement capacity that I talked about. Because if you don't have that capacity to move and you're getting into those positions while you're pitching at high power output, that's where we for me personally, start seeing, breakdowns. But yeah, I think a lot of you guys know that listen to me know that I'm really passionate about mobility. But I'll also link the my mobility routines ebook within the show notes of this episode. All right. Second question we got. Hey, I was wondering what was a good entry level indie ball league to get into. I have only played amateur baseball, but am looking to get my foot in the door for professional. Yo, what up, dude? Yeah, I mean, that's going to all depend, right? Like, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it's like I haven't seen you play, so it's tough to say. But another thing that I would say like goes into it is like age, because I know there's certain indie ball leagues that you have to be under a certain age or something like that, or whatever it may be. But I'd look into the Pecos League. I think there's one other one that I'm not really familiar with. But you can go on Facebook and go to a group called Meet a Prospect, and you can just post in there. And I know there's a ton of like indie ball managers and stuff, and in that group. So that's something that I would encourage you to check out. But yeah, man, hopefully that helps, and best of luck to you. And to piggyback off of that one, I know that was short and sweet, but honestly, guys, if you're a player listening to this right now, and first of all, nice, good job. I appreciate you listening and wanting to get any information that you can. But the next thing is like, use your resources, man. We live in a day and age about, in 2019. Oh shoot, we're almost in 2020. That's crazy. But we live in this like society where everyone's so connected, and with social media, we have like so much power and connection capability with that. So do everything in your power to make sure people are seeing you, man. Like, go on Twitter, post your stuff on Flat Ground app, or tag Flat Ground app, tag Pitching Ninja, go on Facebook, get into these groups. There's tons of groups that you can post your stuff on. Check the ego at the door, man. Like, these are the things that you can do that are within your control to do that I can't encourage you guys enough to do. So yeah. Food for thought, I guess. All right, question number 3. This is a long question, really good though. Hey, Robby, we follow and enjoy your post. I have 7 sons. My eldest are 5. My eldest are current or former Division I ball players, so we follow many baseball-related guys. One of my current college players is a pitcher and in a funk with his fastball. He's never been a power guy, tops at 89, but throws a nasty changeup and slider. His four-seam velocity is way down, 81 to 83, though his spin rate is in the 2200 range, which is a solid, but apparently his fastball is only 30% efficient in staying on the line, says readings from Rapsodo. The ball seems to wobble on its line. Crazy thing is his changeup sits 79-80 with excellent run. He says he feels like he's stuck in the mud throwing his fastball. He's played with different grips to get truer backspin. Nothing's worked. He's a bit of wit's end. I know this is likely an impossible question to answer, but I thought I'd throw it out there, see if you've ever heard of something like this. Many thanks. Let's dive into it. It's good stuff. Hey man, so it's funny you mentioned this and bring up this topic, and yeah, like you said, it's not really impossible to like answer, because in the game of baseball, especially as a pitcher, when we're talking about like these data metrics, I guess you can make the argument for there's absolutes, but in this particular sense, it's really like, for me, it's trial and error to figure out like your strengths. Like you said, like he has changeup and a slider that are perceived as being nasty. And like I would ask, like, what is the Rapsodo saying about that? So anytime we look at spin on a fastball, we tend to look at the average, and we want to stay away from average. We want to be either below or above average, because if we're average, it's kind of like a dead zone, right? So look at it in the sense of a hitter is more accustomed to the average, or seeing the average, and obviously there's tons of metrics that go into that, but we used to call, or I guess it's still being called, like the dead zone, as far as like being in the dead middle of what is average. So the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about like the 30% efficiency is the release, right? Like the ball at release. If you can get some slow-mo video of the ball at release, that'll give him a really good visual of what that actually looks like compared to what he's actually feeling, because the two can be totally separate things. And maybe it's just because at release his wrist is being preset because he lacks like, a certain restriction as far as mobility, or, he's just not releasing the ball in an adequate spot. And like I said, there's a lot of variables here, but just kind of spitballing. But the next thing that I would look into is the ability to throw a two-seam fastball and see what the two-seam fastball data shows, because I'm actually a guy that I throw a four-seam fastball, but if I were to go on a Rapsodo today, my data metrics would be not considered good. So that's why when I come back, like I'm gonna do more two-seam stuff, because I believe my two-seam is gonna play better than throwing a four-seam fastball. Another thing that I would actually look into is seeing if there's a way, again, this kind of goes hand in hand with looking at some slow-mo video of the ball at release, but seeing if there's a way that maybe you can turn that four-seam fastball into like a cutter, because of the lack of, 612, or I guess it would be 612, 12-6, true spin efficiency on the four-seam. So, yeah, I hope that helps. I know I spitballed a lot there, but whatever it is, I think it comes down to, yes, we do want to get truer backspin and see if that could play off our other repertoire. But if he's a guy that has changed slider and doesn't throw a 12-6 curve, I don't necessarily think it's a must-have to throw a true 12-6 four-seam. So, like I mentioned with the two-seam, maybe that could be his savior there, and go to a two-seam and have a pretty good axis. You talk about that laminear effect on the two-seam. Maybe that actually plays exactly into what his four-seam looks like at release. So hopefully that helps. And, best of luck to him. Yeah, I like talking about that stuff, man. Pitch data. That stuff. Geek out on that. All right, fourth question. I've been struggling with striking out batters or even dominating them when I have an 0-2 count. What's your approach in this situation? And thank you so much. Appreciate your content. All right, yeah, good stuff, man. That's a really good question. I actually did a entire segment on 0-2 pitch. I'll link that whole entire segment in the show notes. But here's the answer. Hey, what's up, man? So really good question here. I did a post on this a while back in regards to knowing your strikeout pitches, right? So you have to identify the particular pitches that you can go to that are swing and miss pitches. Now, again, that's kind of going hand in hand with identifying the type of pitcher you are. There's plenty of pitchers that have success that don't necessarily have swing and miss stuff, but they find a way to get outs. I think with 0-2 counts, the biggest mentality is foot on the gas. You see a lot of times, especially younger guys who maybe lack the ability to have swing and miss stuff. They try to get really, really cute. They try to get really fine 0-2, and I'm not saying you do this. I just see it a lot. I did it myself early in my career. When you get 0-2, you try to be really fine, and then you're not able to get the most out of yourself. Because you're trying to put it in a specific pinpoint location, and you are a little bit mentally and physically restricted due to that, and you don't have that freedom. So it's funny. I think when I was 19, I had the worst year of my career, and the thing was I was getting ahead and getting 0-2, getting 1-2, getting into really good counts. But I would, if I could go back and look at the numbers as far as what guys were hitting off me when I was 0-2, 1-2, it'd probably be crazy. But what I looked at after that year was over and tried to identify where I went wrong was I was getting into these really good counts, and then I would drastically change my approach from early in counts, where early in counts I was free, loose, easy, just throwing, and then I'd get into counts where potentially I could get a strikeout, and I'd try so hard to get the strikeout, and then that brought about some restrictions in my delivery. So I'd look into that. So two-part thing as far as identifying your swing and miss stuff, and then don't really change the mentality when you get to those counts. So hopefully that helps, man. Best of luck to you. All right, fifth question. After playing spring, summer, and fall ball, I want to take some time off of throwing. Do you think it's best to completely stop for 2 to 3 months, or keep throwing, but just extremely light and not often? So I will say I'll link the podcast that I did with Randy Sullivan in the show notes as well. Much more educated individual than I am on everything, but we talk about off-season throwing. It's towards the end of the episode. I'm going to include a 20-second soundbite after my response to this email, just to give you guys kind of a idea of where he comes from that standpoint. But again, if you want more detail on this topic, because it's a really popular topic, I'll link that podcast in the show notes. I'll also link a pitching segment, a pitching talk segment that I did on off-season throwing and off-season routine stuff, all in the show notes. So be sure to go check that out, therobbyroshow.com/QAPod5. But here is my response. Yo, what's going on, man? So obviously a very popular question, right, in today's baseball industry is how much time do you take off of throwing? Do you put the ball down? Do you play year round? Blah, 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 blah. It's all going to be dependent upon the individual, man. I think if you're built to handle the stress of throwing a baseball, and you have authentic throwing mechanics, and you have movement and strength capacity, like obviously you're probably more equipped to throw more, right? Compared to the other guy who, considers throwing year round and playing baseball year round, but only plays for 2 hours out of the day, and then the rest of the day is sitting on the couch playing like Fortnite, right? So it's going to be a little bit different per those two individuals. But honestly, man, like I don't hate the idea of doing like once or twice a week when you are in your quote unquote, off season, of just light catch or light plyo ball stuff. That's something that I've done and have felt really good. And to be completely honest with you, it's about identifying when you're going to, how you go about feeling your best when you do pick up a ball again. And that was something that was tough for me. So when I was 18, I went straight from like a high school baseball season to the draft to play my first professional season. And when I got done, I had to go to Instructs. And then by the time I got done with Instructs, I was like, okay, I'm not picking up the ball till, January, which was like 2 months off. And it was the first time I think I'd ever really done that. And then once I did pick up the ball again in January, like I just felt like crap, dude. And it took like a month, 6 to 8 weeks, I would say, honestly, of feeling good again. But that's just me. Everyone's different. So I'd encourage you to, kind of just trial and error period as far as how you want to go about that. I know you said spring, summer, and fall. Like, yeah, that's a lot of throwing. It's a lot of baseball. You didn't give me an age, so I don't really know where you're at with that. It's gonna vary depending on your age as well. But yeah, man, I think there's nothing wrong. Like I said, I don't hate the idea of playing really light catch during your off time. But it's light for a reason. So hopefully that makes sense, man. Best of luck to you. All right, guys, and here is the little soundbite clip from Randy Sullivan talking about this.
You finish your season, the season's over, you high-five everybody, and you go home and you don't pick up a baseball till January. Everything is healing, which is the goal. But it's just like post-op rehab. We cannot let it heal in a disorganized fashion, right? And so we need some stress that's specific to what we're going to have to do, which is throwing, right?
This guy is a stud, man. I really encourage you guys to head over to the show notes and listen to that entire episode if you have yet to do so already, because it's fantastic. Okay, we got last question of the QA podcast number 5. Oh, man, sorry. Okay. I have no friends. Number 6, does it matter that much with setting up on a specific side of the rubber? Let's dive in. Hey, man, good question, dude. Setting up on a specific side of the rubber, that's something that I actually want to dive deeper into. Maybe I'll do a segment on that here in the near future, but really good question. I think it's going to be about like, what is your biggest goal? I know over the course of my career, I've literally been like 17 different types of pitchers. When I was sinking it, so when I was majority a sinker ball pitcher, I set up on the far left side because I wanted my arm, at release to be as even keel, as like center cut as possible, just to give the ball, true movement. It's tough sometimes, like say if I were to go on the right side trying to sink it, I'm having to release the ball a little bit later. Sometimes you see that guys like will struggle with movement if they go to that side. But, then there's been times where I've been all the way on that side just to be more, deceptive towards righties if I'm throwing, a slider. But it's all going to be about, kind of what, I know you mentioned that. I think you said something about throwing a sinking fastball, and, it's going to be about what you feel comfortable with, and that's going to be one of those trial and error periods, you know what I mean? But hopefully what I said made sense as far as like, deception. And honestly, dude, if you're a righty, check to see, statistics on who's hitting you better, righties or lefties. Usually if you're a sinker ball guy, lefties are going to hit you pretty good. And that's something that you can maybe play around with on the rubber to kind of rely on more, a little bit of deception. Or if you just want, pitch profile to be increased. And what I mean by that is like the data, like, movement on the actual pitch. Maybe you can give yourself a better opportunity to say, go all the way on the first base side. Maybe you can get some more movement on that because you'll be releasing the ball center cut. But yeah, man, hopefully that makes sense. Check to see, who's hitting you better, righties or lefties. I think that will give you a good indication of what you need to do. I know you're going to probably face majority righties anyways, but yeah, man, good question. I'd say tinker around, play around with it, right? Like, I know you said you're on third base side, and if you have good command and you think your stuff's good and your catcher's giving you good feedback, maybe play a bullpen on the left side, on the first base side, and see if your stuff plays better. I don't know, because that's going to be, again, it's one of those things that, if you've been doing one way your whole life, how do you know if the other way is, not good or not efficient? So hopefully that makes sense, man. But good question. If you want to take a deeper dive into it, hit me back. We can schedule a consult and see if there's anything more we can dive into on that. But yeah, man, hope that helps, and best of luck to you. Okay, guys. Well, that's going to do it for QA podcast number 5. Thanks for listening. Share this with someone that one of those questions could benefit. But like I said, talked a lot about stuff today that I will link in the show notes. So I'd encourage you to take a deeper dive and head on over to the show notes, theRobbyRoweShow.com/QA-pod5. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. As always, much love and God bless. We'll talk to you next time.